This is the bumper episode, the one where we discuss bridges, tunnels, landscape changes, and of course, welcome a couple of new arrivals. So guys, welcome back to Proper Chuffed. My name's Hilton and I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing. Welcome back to Dunromin and from a slightly different perspective. So we've got quite a lot to cover today, so I'm gonna dive straight into it and we're not gonna mess around too much. So grab yourself a cup of tea or a dram of whiskey. I won't judge you, I promise. And let's dive straight into the updates. Now, previously Dunromin, my fictitious West Highland line, has always been up against this wall. And I finally made the decision this week to pull it away from the wall with a bit of trepidation. Quite scary moving an entire layout. With the idea being that I can finally start working on the sort of scenic side of this side of the wall. Because once the scenic backboards are in, which should come in the next week or two, I have no intention of ever moving this layout away from the wall again. So it's imperative that I now spend this time completing the rear section of the layout, which I basically can't reach from the front. But this has also presented a couple of new opportunities for me. So I think firstly, it's been most important for me to finally finish wrapping up and locking in this side of the mountain. I've done so with a bit of paper and a bit of plaster, and I've kind of closed it all in so then now I can essentially start scenicking this area and never have to worry about it again. But there are a few things we've done to the layout beyond all of this. This is easily the most interesting and exciting time of building a layout because now it starts to really come into perspective and you can start visualizing it a little bit more. So recently I've been able to complete that side of the mountain as I mentioned earlier, and I did the same on the other side. So essentially we're all wrapped up, the mountains are sealed in, and we can continue essentially with the landscaping. I just need to paint that top of the mountain and finish it off, and then we're pretty much done with the mountain beyond just the scenics, if you know what I mean. The station is coming together nicely. There's a few bits and bobs that we need to go through, and we've got a bridge that's finally painted and in place, which is really cool. Beyond all that, we've also got some new rocks on that side of the layout. So I think first things first, let's go take a look at those. So welcome to the other end of the layout here, where I've done a slightly different rock feature from the previous side. Now, the idea with these rocks is that I wanted a little bit of differentiation from the other side, which are a little bit more steep and vertical. These I decided to put on their sides and essentially built in some veins of different types of rock into these just to give them a slightly different perspective. As you can see, they all kind of shift away and are slightly diagonal, and I think that really does give it a very different look and feel. Now, these are not quite finished. I still need to weather them up a little bit more, add a little bit of moss and lichen to these, just like I did on the other side. But overall, I think they're looking rather good. As part of building these rocks, it's important to start taking into account the shape of the mountain, the way the rocks climb the mountain and are exposed at different points of the highlands. So as you can see up here, we've got a slightly different perspective with some rocks and a little bit of a ledge, an overhang down here, similar sort of thing. Further up the mountain, there's all different rocks, but all sort of facing the same way to give the same natural movement of the rock formation. And I think that looks quite successful, and I'm rather happy with the condition of them as they are right now. So shall we talk about the bridge that I've built here? Now, this is a laser cut kit from my good friend Phil, who's once again put together a very nice piece. He did the same with the station, and I really do think that this has come out nicely. So let's dive into how I brought this bridge to life. So to begin the process, I sealed the laser cut kits I got from Phil with Rust-Oleum Grey, and this gives me a really solid baseline to work off of. Once dry, I use an acrylic marker, this is a Gundam marker, to painstakingly paint individual bricks. This seems like a lot of work now, but long term, it definitely pays off. We'll skip through this part because it certainly isn't fun to watch. But a little while later, and with some black bricks added, it's time to get towards the weathering. This time round, I decided not to use an airbrush. I decided to rather tackle this with acrylic paints instead. Using an almost dry brush technique, I muted down some acrylic black and began painting the underframes of the arches. I then used a dry brushing technique to create more notable black streaks alongside the bridge. And anywhere I feel like there would have been a lot of dirt buildup, I kind of dry brush a little bit more just to give it a bit more character. To add an extra layer of dirt and grime, I use a brown wash on the face of the bridge. This really starts toning down that grey and making it look a lot more worn and used. I then highlight certain sections of the bridge with a dark rust wash. I apply it on quite heavily and then just dab away with a dry brush to make sure that it spreads out evenly and isn't too noticeable. Next, I just want to touch on the tunnel and tunnel portals that are all over the layout. So we've got a couple different variations of these tunnel portals, but this one is the primary one in front of you now. I spent a fair amount of time putting this tunnel portal together, so let's take a quick look at how I brought it to life. In a similar vein as the bridge, I begin by painting individual bricks on the tunnel portal. I use a variety of different colors and start with a dark green. I then use a light sort of clay color to imply a different type of brick. Finally, I paint a dark brown. You can use as many different colors as you would like on this, but the point is to create a variation in the color of the different bricks so that when we look at it later, it won't look uniform at all. Now, unfortunately, the video where I gave the tunnel portal a black wash was corrupted, but it came out a little bit too dark, unfortunately. So I used a toothbrush, not my toothbrush, dipped in a bit of IPA to just pull back a little bit of that wash on the face of the brick. I then added a brown wash to the lower sections and anywhere where there might be a little bit of drainage or dripping along the side of the portal or the brick structures on the outside of it. Finally, I used white weathering powder to imply water drainage and build up over time. And then muted this down again with another black wash just so it wasn't so severe. To top it all off, I used some black washes just to create some differentiation in the stains of drainage on the tunnel portal. And I think it came together really nicely. I still do need to add a bit of moss and damp buildup to this, but I'll do that at a later stage. So on top of all of this stuff, I've had a little bit of time to put together a radio tower, and that brings me to the point of signaling on this layout. Now, Dunromin is set in the West Highlands of Scotland. And if you know the West Highlands and how that system operates, it uses RETB, which is essentially a radio token beacon system. Now, RETB obviously requires a fair amount of radio signal, so it made sense to pick up a radio tower, and I got this 3D kit from litprints.co.uk. They produce this, and I think you can pick it up for about £15 or so. I've painted it up nicely and of course included some dishes and radio antenna. It needs to still be weathered, and I need to complete the sort of power generator unit at the bottom of the tower before I'm fully happy with it and considering it done. But I really like the aesthetic that a tower like this brings to the West Highlands. I think it kind of gives it that modern feeling, and I think it completes the aesthetic of what I'm going for. So looking forward to installing this at a future point. I just couldn't help myself but actually put this together. Now, you've seen this rock face here behind me. I put that together in a previous video, and it's of course slightly different to the one on that side that you've seen in this video. But we need to round off this cutout. So I wasn't quite sure how to tackle this because of course there was no landscape here previously, but I have come to a solution, and I'm going to take you through that now. I begin this process by cutting out the correct curvature of the cutaway using polystyrene. I then make duplicates of this shape and build them and stack them on top of one another, gluing them down on top of one another at each step. I then take my plaster rocks and begin gluing them to the side of the polystyrene, trying to mimic as best as possible the formation on the other side of the rail. Finally, I use a small bit of plaster just to fill in the gaps between rocks and seal all the rocks to the polystyrene. Final step is to prime it with Rust-Oleum Grey, and now it's ready to be weathered. So this unique removable rock face obviously still needs to be weathered up correctly, but I've got the foundations in place and I'm pretty happy with it. I've kind of duplicated the same sort of rock style as it is on the other side of the layout. So essentially what you should have is a almost mirror image on the other side of the cutaway to imply that it's all been blasted away to make way for the railway. Way. So I'll be weathering this up in the next week or so and be putting it in place. Now I haven't decided actually if I want to keep this as a removable section because it does provide opportunity for me to take some videos and content from an interesting perspective if I do remove the rock. I'll probably be putting it in place, but it is a thought. Removable landscapes are a videographer's dream, or amateur videographer, I guess. It wouldn't be a video of mine if I didn't have some new arrivals, of course. So today I'm happy to introduce a couple of new additions to the shed at Dunromin. I think before I do, a little bit of insight into my mind and the process of picking up locos. Now, more recently, I've found myself really focusing in on what I want for the Highlands for this specific layout. So I've been focusing a lot less on steam and more on specific diesels that are required. In case you didn't know, I have a huge 37 problem, so that is always a persistent thing, and I can't really help myself with that. But the process of picking up locos is not as easy as it may be for you if you're in the UK, for example. For me, I pay a very high import tax, so it's important for me to try and bundle things together and then have them shipped out one by one. So I have a fairly large backlog of locomotives that I've not really yet explored on the channel. But that is sort of evergreen content that I can easily go and tap into and do videos on when I feel like doing them. I must be very honest, doing a locomotive overview is a very tiresome process. It takes a lot of time, a lot of research on my part, and while I really enjoy it, it does take longer to produce those sorts of videos. So while I'm in the fervor of building this layout, my locomotive overviews have not been as frequent, I will say. So last weekend, I got a package from 00 Dave. Now Dave is essentially my UK postmaster, the guy who collects all my stuff once I've made purchases, bundles it all together and then ships it off to me. And it's a bit like Christmas when a package from Dave arrives once or twice a year because there's a whole lot of stuff included in it, and that's always very cool. So there are quite a few locos that arrived with Dave's package, and you'll be seeing those in future. But I thought I'd just highlight one that I've been waiting for quite some time. And that locomotive is of course the Class 31 you've been seeing the whole time throughout this video in her beautiful West Coast Railways maroon colors. Isn't she absolutely delightful? Now, I've made some modifications because she was in fact a DCC ready model. And what I did was I took my previous Bachmann 31, removed the fan and installed it as well as the sound card, and to be honest, couldn't be happier. While I really do like my petroleum sector liveried 31, I'd much rather have this 31, which is going to see a lot more use on the line, with sound and a spinning fan. So very, very happy with this. This color scheme is absolutely beautiful, perhaps my favorite on the 31. Of course, I'm a little bit West Coast biased, given that I focus on the West Highland line, and they do a lot of operations and tours within the West Highland line. Now, the next locomotive is one of Dunromin's old guard. I've had this loco for about 2 years now, but finally, I got her sound fitted and with a custom profile too. So I'd like to reintroduce the LMS Garrett to Dunromin. how good does that sound? And I can guarantee you it's even better in person. So this LMS Garrett I've had in the collection for quite some time. I sent it off to my friend Rikus at the Third Rail. He's also a South African YouTuber, and I'm going to drop his details in the link below. But essentially, I gave him the Garrett. He had an ESU decoder that he was selling, and I said, great, I'll pick it up, but could you install a Garrett profile on it for me? And he tinkered away with it. He's an absolute master of sound profiles, and I'd love to learn how to do that someday from him. But he essentially built me a custom LMS Garrett sound profile. He initially, I think, put in a GM/AM Garrett sound profile because he obviously does South African locomotives. And he said it just didn't sound quite right. So he checked out the cylinder diameters of this Garrett and found an English sound profile, and then essentially matched up to create two synchronized beats that obviously go out of sync once it's under power. And the final result, after many, many hours of tinkering, is absolutely outstanding. I am blown away with it. It's really brought this Garrett to life, and I could not be happier. Now, I know that Garretts didn't operate on the West Highland line, but I do have to make a couple exceptions because this really is my favorite configuration for a locomotive. And while I don't have a GM/AM that I can run on this layout anymore, the LMS Garrett really does do a good job of it. So you'll have to excuse my Rule 1 implications here, because I really just do like running Garretts and seeing all that motion in gear. It's a very noisy little thing, kind of doing its own thing every now and then. So it's got a lot of life to it, and I think Rikus has done an amazing job with it. So this is a little bit of a squeeze for the next couple weeks. On this side and the other side of the layout, it's going to be a little bit tough to move around. I feel a little bit claustrophobic in here, I won't lie. I don't like that feeling at all, but I have to navigate it and just make it work until the scenic backboards come in. So it's essentially given me the time now to start working on that side. Now, the plan is to include about a 5 centimeter extra gap on that side of the layout, so that the scenic backboard isn't right up against the bridge and the side of the line here. I just want to create a little bit of distance just so that I've got that extra room to breathe before the scenic backboard takes over and does the rest of the job from there. So I'll be doing that in the next week or so, and I really look forward to finally adding the scenic backboards and being done with that, pushing it back against the wall and having all my space back to myself again. As you can see, a lot of stuff has been happening here. I've really been quite busy tinkering away at different things and smaller projects, just making sure that I cross my T's and dot my I's with every element of this layout so far. I won't lie, I'm absolutely itching to get to some grass and scenics at some point, but I must be patient because that time is coming. Before I finish up, I just want to thank my Westies, the guys who've been supporting my channel that little bit extra. Your support means the world to me, and it helps make the channel a better place for you. So thank you to Annie, Mystic Brick, Rob from the Kiln Line, Simon Thompson, Bill from 3B Rail, Jersey Bill, Tony from Choberton Junction, Derek L, James from the Little Western Railway, Dan from Pedantic Mongrels Railway Channel, Joachim Bengston, Morizo, Clagfest, McDavid, and our newest member, Chris from Valleys 5600. Thank you all so much for your support. It means the world to me. Whew, okay, well, there's an update for you. A lot going on here, and I'm really excited to take the next steps very soon. So I'm hoping and praying that the next major update is going to be the scenic backboards, and I look forward to sharing that with you all very, very soon. I hope you've had a fantastic long weekend. I hope you're keeping well. And again, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. If you haven't subscribed, please consider doing so. That would be really cool to have you on board. And if you have already and you enjoyed this video, drop me a like. Thank you so much. Until I see you next time, keep your engines fired and of course, stay on track. All the best.